like this is, it's a collection of love stories, basically. It feels that they have a perspective, kind of a very mature perspective on love, even if some of these people are very young. There's a melancholy in the way that it approaches the idea of love and feelings and romanticism. Have you ever thought of how these very different types of love story in the film sort of work together, or if there's one perspective that encompasses all?
See, as a culture, Indians do not display their love very openly. It's a very hidden, secretive, kept to yourself kind of emotion over time and over different cultures also. So you'll never see couples kissing in public, never holding hands, nothing. It's something you keep to yourself. I mean, not even just the sexual part of it, but even in terms of emotions. And I have characters who do not probably speak each other's language, are very constrained by their responsibilities. It makes them age faster. And this is the truth. If you look at people living on the streets, having to support a family, single girls, a lot of women that I have worked with tend to not fall in love, not get into a relationship. They come from poor families where they are the educated ones and have to work. So it's a very real thing. And inevitably there is no freedom in loving them. Then it just becomes a part of a protocol. It's the same with a boy. He is, I mean, there are hormones. You love, and you're watching love on Bollywood happening all the time, but there is very little space within reality to practice it. And the old woman, she also has, comes with the constraints. So I think more than their being mature about love, it's the constraints that makes them far more responsible, far more have a lot of things which are controlling their love than for them to be able to feel freely. Which is what I want people to understand, that everybody feels love, but the conditions around you give you the chance to express it, not express it. And that's why in their memories, in their fantasies, they are very open, and yet not open in the way it is in the Western society. Here it's openness is to be able to imagine the rest of your life with somebody. That
so
romantic
it's a luxury
part.
in some way to be able to.
It's a luxury. It's a privileged situation to be either in love with somebody who's from another community, or to love somebody who's from the same gender. These are all taboos even now. Much more now so than say 10, 15 years back.
And I mean, based on this, it makes sense. What I wanted to ask is, was this always a plurality in your mind of fragments of possible potential loves? Because I know that you used one of these in a short. You kind of tried to deconstruct the central idea, but I imagine, so based on what you're saying now, it needs to be shown on multiple people with multiple backgrounds and with multiple circumstances. So that was, since the beginning, this approach, this collective approach to showing the different ways?
No, not really. It was one love story and then another love story and many love stories that I was thinking of as individual stories that interestingly came together when I thought of a feature. But for me, each story came almost by itself, and I knew these two characters have to fall in love. The way they fall in love and what happens to them after kept changing. But these were just, say, Salim and Kamla. In another film called Girgit, you know, they were there, and he was Muslim and she was Hindu, and but what happens to their love was something that was left completely open. So I essentially wanted to make a love story. And then many of them I thought of as different short films, this, that, everything. And then finally when I sat down to write the script, they kind of came together and I started linking them. And then I felt the way I link them brings out a love story to the city in a way. So then that made sense. So it's like weaving a garland. You weave many, many, many love stories together, and you probably have something beautiful at the end of it, which is not going to last very long.
Yes. There's an element of something fleeting, something not permanent, even in because most of the characters are immigrants or about to be immigrants. How does that inform? Because at the same time, you're right, it's also very much about a sense of place. So where they are now and the different faces of the city that you show.
Essentially, Bombay is a completely migrant city. Everybody, almost everybody, like I think 90-95% of the population has come from different places, settled, sometimes generations ago. But the local, the original people have been only the fishermen community. And this started way back with the British coming in, centuries ago. So the woman, Miss Shirley, is an Anglo-Indian, which is a remnant of the people who were left behind by the British, who intermarried the Indians and had these children who were a mixed lot. So I'm talking about migration from centuries ago, and then the Mughals, and then people, these characters from these various other states. So the city is built by people from outside the city, for people from outside the city, and it is the most successful city in the country. So it's such a melting pot of different cultures, different languages, different food, and it has survived and become so vibrant and beautiful because of this. And today we have a right-wing government in place which is trying to monopolize the culture within each and every city, which is like Bombay. So for me it is a comment on saying the fact that we are so different, each and every one of us coming together and trying to find similarities, even if you don't speak each other's language, and you can really fall in love. Because what you wouldn't understand probably in the film is they also speak very different languages.
Oh, yeah,
the Indian languages,
yeah.
each and every one of them. Like, you need not understand the other language, it is even written differently. So all that, when you're put together and you fall in love, and how you bring it out becomes very real, very rich for me, and it's a way of saying that is the beauty of the city, that you can be from anywhere. It absorbs you and it lets you, it gives you a chance for survival. In a very cruel sense, but ironically, but it gives you.
What do you mean in a cruel sense?
Like they don't get places to live. They're not citizens of the place. They are usually what the law is chasing, because they're always on the wrong side of the law, even if they're not doing anything. Petty thievery, working as a less than a 14-year-old, or working in a dance bar, which is going to get shut down, which is why she needs to then migrate to a place like Dubai to make a living. So it's like being temporarily kept here. There, you don't know what is your future, you know what is your past, but you really don't know your future, and you're living by the day. So there's scores and scores of people living like this in the underbellies. They're the ones who are building the buildings, they're the ones who are cleaning, but they have no voting rights, they don't belong to the city.
And it starts, there's a scene that it stayed with me because you shoot it from the back of the restaurant with the kids, they hide. And working in
it's a very typical situation in Bombay. In the whole of India actually, but Bombay more so.
I'm curious, did you get a chance to see No.7 Cherry Lane?
No, I've been dying to see that film.
Because I kept thinking back to that film.
And that was in the official...
It was also in Venice.
Yes, in
and I
Venice.
think that these two films really speak to each other in a way, because there's this mixture of, like, there's a profound sense of feelings and love and memory and love lost, but also just a sense of longing, and they're also so tied to a place, because the IONCINEMA film, it's all about Hong Kong and the history of Hong Kong and the art of Hong Kong, and of course your film too, even maybe not as directly in the sense that it's not the characters themselves, but this incredible animation, so it feels a film about art too.
Our films are traveling together in so many festivals, but I have not seen it. I could not see it in Miami, and I could not see it in Venice either. It was in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I think you would appreciate it.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. I'm sure I will. And a friend of mine also told me, and there are cats.
Yes,
so you have to
I
see
love the
film.
two cats in your film. That was
so cats was also one thing, and she knows me, and we have you have this cat connection, friends all over the world. And she's from Hong Kong, and she said, you must see this film, it's in Venice, but I haven't. I'm really dying to see that film.
Yeah. I was really struck by the pictorial complexity of the different techniques that you use. So walk me through from an artistic perspective on even the subtle differences. Sometimes, you're traveling to time, places, modes of expression, but there's a sense of sometimes even the way that you focus on the faces and they kind of emerge into focus from the backgrounds, which is more impressionistic.
Yes.
Tell me how that worked for you. How do you?
For me, graphic style comes really before telling the story, and I like to go from one style into another style, and it has been my mode of storytelling through my short films also. And essentially what I've done in this film, as with my one earlier short film, is to set the entire reality in one certain style, and then every character going into his or her imaginary world has a different graphic style of storytelling. It just gives me an excuse to work in 3 or 4 different styles instead of keeping the entire film in one, because it's painted frame by frame and you get bored and tired. So if it is a story of the girl and if it's her imagination, I would resort to the kind of art style that exists in the place that she comes from. And she comes from the central north of India, where miniature paintings, which was what the Persian miniatures were, centuries ago they came, and this was absorbed by India, and it's quite famous for miniature paintings. It's just one of the art styles, traditional art styles of that place, which is a dying art form because it's centuries old. But they're beautiful paintings, and for me it's a challenge to go into these paintings and move them in terms of animation. So when she looks at her past, and these are palaces, they're centuries old palaces, there's no photographs that you know how these palaces looked, they're in ruins now. But these paintings are what people at large know how these palaces looked. So for me, going into those paintings is kind of recreating what that time must have been through an art form, instead of doing it realistically in a live action film. And the same with the boy. The boy is from Kashmir. So there is this very kitschy truck art paintings which happens between Pakistan and India, where they decorate these trucks with very local kind of work with bright colors and all. So if that is what he's surrounded by, then why not tell his fantasy in that style? So that is what I would use for him. And then for the old woman, it was an excuse to go into the film noir kind of look, to place her as, and these are real stories, these dancers used to belong to the 1950s, 60s, where the girls used to dress up as men and dance. So it's directly from the way it existed, and I use that as a style, again a graphic style, to get into the black and white world, the way it was lit during 1950s, 60s, and the way Bombay must have been at that time. So it's like recreating a vintage look of the city, and that is also well researched. We had trams, we had those certain cars, horse carts, and the architecture was different. So each art style is an excuse to recreate a certain space and time. Some of them exist, some of them do not exist.
Did that idea come first, in the sense that, you know, I want to explore these art styles and then I'll go with the characters towards that, or you had the characters?
It happens both ways. Like each character comes from a certain place and has an art style which I would like to explore of that certain space, because every state has 3 or 4 or maybe even more than that. Sometimes it is an art style, sometimes it is a dance form, sometimes it can be shallow puppetry and things like that. So each character would come from there. Finally, for the story, I had these 3 characters, so their styles came with them, and they kind of go hand in hand for me when I'm thinking of stories. I do think of a style and say, I love this, I want to set a story in this. It's like, you know, you go to a place and you say, oh, I want to shoot here. Yeah. It's something like that. So I look at an art style and say, yes, I want to set a story here. And of course, I have 10,000 of them, then I have to streamline down to 4 or 5.
Okay. And I know this project took a fairly long time to make it and to conceive it. What do you think about the state of animation in India as an artistic language in cinema? How do you feel within it? And do you feel that you're bringing something that has not been done so far?
The state is quite, yeah, it took 6 years to make, but 4 years was to find the finance. During which time I made a short film, I wrote the script, and 2 years in the making, in actually making the film. So the struggle was, of course, you have an animation film which is not for children, which doesn't have star voices, which has social issues, and is a debut film. So we don't have any kind of state funding for animation film. We kind of compete with Bollywood. So it was tough in that sense, but I had a French co-producer, and 3 years of film markets and co-production markets and things like this, and I found my Indian producer at the end of it to get the finance in place, because it's expensive to make an animation film. So the struggle was really that. And having made it, I started 2 other films, and this was the third one that I could complete. Having made it, I really hope it will change the scene back in India, because what we are doing is outsource work, a lot of back-end outsource work, cheap, for even Oscar-winning animation films. So I'm hoping something like this will change the way people are looking at Indian animation, and help a few other animation filmmakers to be able to get over the struggle of this hurdle of getting finance for films. So if it is successful in terms of the box office, then we are there. Otherwise, in terms of festivals and receiving accolades and all, I think I have already set a precedent, and one would hope to see that the country helps you and other animation filmmakers, because there is a lot of talent. We are all just stuck with, there is no precedent to it. So I'm hoping this will be a precedent.
Okay.
But only time can say whether it is.
Of course. Well, thank you.
Hey, this is Eric from IONCINEMA.com. If you want to support us, subscribe below. For more reviews, interviews, film festival coverage from Sundance, Cannes, Toronto, you want to check out these guys on this side.